Welcome to the Daily Bolster. Each day we welcome transformational executives to share their real-world experiences and practical advice about scaling yourself, your team, and your business.
Welcome to the Daily Bolster. I'm Matt Blumberg, co-founder and CEO of Bolster, and I'm here today with Andrea Kayal. Andrea is the CRO of Help Scout. She is a career CMO CRO for businesses who serve SMBs. She is also the Dean of the CMO School, which sounds like a very exalted title. The Dean of the CMO School at Pavilion, formerly Revenue Collective. Andrea, it's great to see you.
You too, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, when I think about the job of a CEO, I think the job has at its core the ability to explain and articulate the forward path of the company, right? The forward trajectory of the company, the vision, and do that in a way that's inspiring people. And so much of that is going to be the growth story. So how do you tell that growth story to investors or prospective investors, employees and people you're recruiting, customers and prospects? So my question to you as a growth expert is, what are 3 effective things that CEOs can do to articulate not just the fact that there is a growth story, but how the company is going to grow forward looking?
Totally. Well, I think first and foremost, I actually think it's I wouldn't say a gap in some board meetings, but I do think that there's an opportunity to make sure that it's part of every story, because, growth is something you need foresight about. You can't just start growing one day. You need to do a lot of planning, whether that's, people or investments. And frankly, when you think about what growth means, it means like how you are allocating your capital, like a hedge fund, right? Like the LPs give the VCs money, the VCs give the CEO money. The CEO is usually giving the CRO or the CMO the money then to like make the bets. And so I think the 3 ways that you can best kind of show the board how that, kind of like what that vision is for growth. I think first is making sure you have a very clear story about the capital allocation. You can start very high level, which means marketing is going to drive 30% of our growth, business development, 20%, paid, 50%, and whatever your kind of mix is. I do think being clear on what that mix looks like and how that mix changes over time is important. So for example, maybe you have marketing at 30%, and you have SDR at like 15%. But if you find that SDR is expensive, you want to kind of like bring that number down over time. You kind of want to like show what this mix looks like in this forward-looking view. The second thing is the forecast for how you're growing should be just as clear and articulate as the sales forecast. I do think like that often gets overlooked in board meetings where there's not necessarily kind of like this double click on, is it working or is it not working? It's usually an appendix slide or something that like gets, talked about on occasion. I think it probably should be the topic of conversation every single board meeting, because usually it comes up after the fact when something broke and then you're kind of like reflecting on how you plug the gaps. The third I would say is, just having a clear picture of what market forces may impact this over time. For example, I was at a company where, Apple launched something that was very similar to the product. And it was, they're Apple, they have a lot of money and they can kind of like sort of like, crush you in one fell swoop if they really start, putting money against it. So I think one way at that is continuing to read S1s of competitors, or, just having a better pulse on kind of like what's happening around you, sort of this like competitive, like, I don't want to say SWOT, it sounds so old school, but like you kind of really need to have your finger on the pulse of that stuff. So those would be kind of the 3 things I think of when I think of growth.
Those are great. I love all 3. I particularly like the first one, the sort of capital allocation framework, and the through line from LPs straight down to marketing. That's such an interesting way of thinking about it.
Totally.
Andrea Kayal, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Matt.